There is a specific kind of silence that belongs to certain people. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of contentment, but the silence of someone who has been talking for years and slowly realized that no one was really listening. You know that silence. Maybe you have been living inside it for so long that you stop noticing the weight of it pressing down on your chest every morning when you wake up. You go through the motions, you show up, you contribute, you try, and somewhere along the way the world just keeps moving like you were never there. Like your presence is a background, detail in someone else's story. Like you are the extra in a film where everyone else has a speaking role, and you were handed a script with blank pages. That feeling, that specific and brutal feeling of being looked through instead of looked at, is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that something is broken inside you. It is, in fact, the first mark of something far more rare and far more dangerous than the world is willing to admit. Because the people who are ignored are often the ones the world does not yet have the vocabulary to understand. Charles Bukowski was ignored for most of his life. Not metaphorically, not in a romantic way that makes for a clean narrative in retrospect. He was actually practically consistently invisible to the world that eventually claimed him as a genius. He worked in post offices. He drank in bars where nobody asked his name. He wrote thousands of poems and stories and sent them into a void that returned mostly silence and form rejection letters. He was not discovered young. He was not celebrated while he still had enough youth to feel the warmth of it. He built something in the dark, alone, without permission, without applause, and without any reasonable expectation that it would ever matter to anyone outside his own four walls. And then something happened. Not because the world changed, because he never stopped. What most people miss about Bukowski is that his invisibility was not something he overcame by becoming visible to others. He became untouchable by becoming undeniably himself. There is a difference between those two things that most people never examine closely enough, and that difference is the entire architecture of his philosophy. The world offers you a version of success that is fundamentally built on external recognition. It tells you that you exist when others confirm your existence. It tells you that your work matters when enough people say it matters. It tells you to wait for permission, to wait for validation, to wait for some external signal that finally announces you are real and worthy, and worth paying attention to. Bukowski looked at that entire system and treated it like a bad hangover, something to survive, something to work through, something that would pass if you just kept going, and did not make the mistake of believing it meant something about your actual value. He once wrote that what matters most is how well you walk through the fire. That line is not motivational in the way a poster on a corporate wall is motivational. It is a raw, almost clinical observation about survival and authenticity. Walking through fire is not about arriving somewhere. It is about what you refuse to surrender while the flames are doing their work. The people who are ignored, the ones who live in that specific silence, are almost always walking through some kind of fire that the comfortable world around them cannot see and does not particularly want to see. You have been walking through yours, probably longer than you have told anyone, probably longer than you have admitted to yourself. Before we go deeper into this, stop for a moment. If you are watching this and something in what has been said already feels familiar in your chest, in that place where the things you never say out loud tend to live, then this message is for you specifically. There are people in the comments of this video right now who are carrying the same weight you are, people who were passed over, overlooked, dismissed, talked around instead of talked to, people who have begun to wonder if the problem is them. If you feel that way even slightly, go to the comments right now and write this: I was ignored, I am not finished. That is all. Copy it and paste it there. Because when someone who is carrying that weight sees those words written by another real person, something shifts. The loneliness gets a little less total. And that matters more than most things the internet offers on any given day. Bukowski did not romanticize suffering in the way that people who have not read him carefully tend to assume. He did not think pain was beautiful because it was pain. He thought that pain, when you stopped running from it and started looking at it directly, had a kind of clarifying power that comfort never would. Comfort keeps you negotiating with the world on the world's terms. It keeps you adjusting yourself, softening your edges, translating your actual self into a version that the room you are standing in can accommodate without discomfort. Bukowski refused that translation. He wrote from inside the experience without cleaning it up first, without making it easier to digest, without apologizing for the smell of it. And that refusal, that stubborn insistence on showing the thing as it actually was, rather than as it was supposed to be, is precisely what made him impossible to ignore once people finally encountered him. You cannot look away from something that is more honest than anything else you have ever seen. The post office years, the years of grinding, work and anonymous living that Bukowski documented in his novel of the same name, were not wasted years in any meaningful sense. They were the years when he built the muscle that would eventually make everything else possible. Not financial muscle, not social muscle, but the particular strength that comes from doing your real work in the margins of a life that is officially about something else entirely. He wrote in the hours that were technically his to waste. He wrote when he was tired, when he was broke, when the rejection was fresh enough to sting. He wrote not because he believed the work would be seen, but because not writing was a form of death that he refused to participate in. That distinction matters enormously. He was not writing toward recognition. He was writing away from disappearance. This is the thing about invisibility that the comfortable version of this story never tells you. Being ignored is not the opposite of being powerful. In many cases, and in Bukowski's case specifically, being ignored is the condition under which a certain kind of power becomes possible. Because when no one is watching, you cannot perform. When no one is validating each step, you cannot move. Based on the applause, you are left with only the actual thing, the work itself, the words themselves, the decisions themselves, stripped of all the social theater that usually corrupts the process before it can produce anything real. The ignored person, if they do not collapse under the weight of the silence, is often building something that the watched person never could, because the watched person is always, on some level, building for the audience rather than for the truth. Bukowski became untouchable, not when fame arrived, but long before, in the years when he decided that the silence of being ignored was not a verdict, it was a condition. And conditions, unlike verdicts, do not determine the outcome. They only shape the terrain in which the outcome is being built. He built in that terrain for decades. He built badly sometimes. He built drunk sometimes. He built in ways that were messy and imperfect and would not survive any standard workshop critique. But he built, and the accumulation of that building, the sheer unrelenting mass of it, eventually became something that the world did not have the option to keep ignoring. Not because he demanded attention, because he became undeniable. You are not invisible because you lack worth. You are invisible because the world has not yet developed the instruments sensitive enough to detect what you are actually doing. That sounds abstract, but it is not. It is an observation about timing and about the relationship between genuine work and the recognition that eventually, not always but often, follows it. The question Bukowski forces you to ask is not whether you will be seen. The question is whether you will keep going long enough and honestly enough to become something that seeing or not seeing no longer defines. Whether you will reach the place where the silence no longer has any power over the work, where the ignored years become the foundation rather than the wound. If this video reached something in you that most things do not reach, take 1 second and press like. Not as a reflex, but because this kind of content only finds the people who need it, if the people who felt it tell the algorithm it mattered. It is a small gesture with a real consequence. And if you want to keep going deeper into the parts of human experience that most channels are too comfortable to touch, subscribe. This channel exists for the people who were never fully addressed by the things that were supposed to address them. Every video here is made for the person who has been walking through fire quietly and needs someone to sit with them in that heat and tell them with full honesty and no performance that they are not finished, not even close.